Meyer brand grills up the value you expect with quality you can taste in every bite. Try our new quarter-pound beef franks, cradled in our own hot dog buns and topped with tangy, no-sugar-added ketchup or easy-squeeze whipped salad dressing. Top your burger with our convenient burger-shaped Colby cheese slices. And don't forget the sides, like party-size Ripple potato chips, perfect for scooping, and our own special recipe cool and creamy macaroni salad. Stop into Meyer and discover big taste and bigger savings on Meyer brand.
There's something satisfying about looking for a checkpoint in the middle of the woods and finding it. I mean, it's like you're a little kid finding a birthday present or opening a birthday present. It's just like, it's really exciting and you're like, okay, a little success. Now let's find another one, It's addictive in a lot of ways.
Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Today we're talking to Mark Lattanzi about adventure racing. If you've heard of adventure racing, we've definitely featured it on the show, people who've done adventure racing before, but we've never just gone over what is the sport, how to do it, at least not in a long time. There has been a resurgence recently with the Amazon documentary coming out a few years ago about the Eco Challenge in Fiji. Someone who's a part of that adventure was Mark here. And Mark has been in this adventure racing world for over 20 years. He's literally written a book about it, loves to teach people, and loves to introduce new people. So I thought he'd be a great guest to feature just about this sport and some of the things it can do. But Mark's going to tell you more about what adventure racing is, why people do it, and some of the ways that you can get involved. But before we jump in, let's hear from a couple of our sponsors. Obviously, with anything, adventure racing is gear heavy. It's gear intensive. There's a lot of it, but it's not necessarily incredibly specialized things. There's a lot that you can get that's used, and I would suggest going to rerouted.co to look for anything that you might need for gear for your next adventure, but you don't want to, pay out-of-pocket brand spanking new prices. A lot of gear, when it's well built and well made, it'll last forever, but, some of us might not need it forever. So that's why Rerouted is also a great place to sell used gear. Whether you're looking for it yourself, you're looking to sell some, rerouted.co is where I suggest starting. 1, you're going to keep stuff out of landfills. 2, you're going to save a little money. 3, it's going to be a pretty unique piece of gear. Chances are you'll be the only one that has it. And 4, sometimes just getting something used can make your adventure actually happen. Instead of having to save up for that $1,500 or whatever, maybe you can find it for a lot less, just used. And that can get you out there sooner than you planned. So thank you, Rerouted, for supporting the show. And again, check it out, rerouted.co. Next is Gooder sunglasses. I love wearing Gooder sunglasses. They're inexpensive but high quality sunglasses made with a ton of different designs. I'm wearing a pair. I'm not wearing them right now because I'm looking at a computer screen, but I've got them on my hat right now just because I always have them on me. The Gooder solution to ugly, expensive, and overly engineered sunglasses are the 4 Fs. They got to be fun. They got to be fashionable. They got to be functional and affordable. That's probably my favorite right there. They look good. They have a ton of different designs, like I mentioned. They do 30-day free returns because you can buy them online, and free shipping anywhere in the U.S. over $50. And they were also the 2-time Runner's World Gear of the Year winning brand. I love them so much that I even have my 2-year-old wearing them. He actually really enjoys wearing sunglasses, so I take my wife's pair, put it on his head. I wear mine. We go on bike rides. We go on kayak rides. We're looking fashionable. We're looking fun. And they are definitely affordable. They also got this cool thing on their website where you can virtually try a pair so you can see what they look like on you before you purchase. So treat yourself to a pair or 2 or 3 by going to Gooder.com. That's GOODR.com. Use the code ASP15 to get 15% off your entire order. Your face will thank you. All right, that's enough ads for now. But before we jump in, Mark actually just finished Expedition Oregon, which is considered America's toughest race, and their team, Lattanzi, won 9th place, which is pretty awesome. If you want to find out more about that or more about Mark's book, Squiggly Lines, please check out the show notes. All right, let's get into the episode. Hey, folks. Welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We've been hearing from you, and some of y'all have want kind of an intro into adventure racing. We've had adventure racers on the show, but being Adventure Sports Podcast, sometimes we just do the basics on a specific sport, and today's going to be one of those episodes with Mark Lattanzi. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Now, you've essentially written, I don't know if it's the book on adventure racing, but it's definitely a book on adventure racing that's well known, Squiggly Lines. You're kind of a pillar in this adventure racing community. Is that fair to say?
Well, I've been in it a long time. And so, I definitely, my name has gotten around. I don't, maybe good and bad.
There you go.
But I wrote a book and self-published and kind of got it out there, and people seem to like it. And so it was a fun time doing that.
Tell us about the sport itself. Like if you don't mind, let's go back to what is adventure racing?
Right. Yeah. Which is one of my goals in the past 5 years has been, when I say I'm an adventure racer, people don't say, "What is that?" So
right.
We're not there yet. Right. It's not very mainstream, but it is definitely more popular. So an adventure race is a multi-sport competition where there's no set course. They're just checkpoints that you have to find using a map and a compass. And each checkpoint has a various, you might do 10 checkpoints on foot, running, and then you might do another 10 or 15 on a bike, and then you might get in a boat of any variety, a kayak, a canoe, a sailboat, a flat raft. And then you might do some climbing or rappelling, and then you might get back on your bike, and then it gets even crazier from there. But paddling, cycling, and trekking are the three main elements, but there's a lot of others that get thrown into races. I've been in caves, I've been in sailboats, climbing. So sometimes you put your boat you put your bike in the boat with you and take it across the lake, and then you get out, and if you have an inflatable boat, you roll it up and stuff it in your backpack and get on your bike and keep going. So it's a very versatile sport. Typically it's teams, co-ed teams, and the races are time-based. So like a short adventure race is 6 hours, and a long one can be 10 days and anywhere in between.
Holy cow. 10 days. Let me ask you this. What's the aspect of the team for? It's not a relay. You're all going together. Correct.
It is not a relay. It is, I would say, several aspects. One is it adds this element of a lot of challenges you really need a team to get through. But also for safety, having 3 or 4 people, if somebody does wreck their bike because they haven't slept in 2 days, there's more people there to help out. You keep each other awake. You can trade off responsibilities. If somebody's hurting, you can take some of the weight off of their back. So there's a lot of aspects. Teamwork is an integral part of it, but you're all doing every event together. And if any one of you drops out, you are no longer official in the event. A lot of times you're allowed to keep going, but you're not ranked.
Wow, you have to have a strong team, mentally strong.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very mental sport, and that's the great thing of it. It's not. It's physical for sure, but the mental aspect is much more important. On day 4, you fall apart, and being able to mentally go, just say, okay, I can keep going. I can get over this next hill, or over to the next checkpoint. You don't think about, there's another 4 days of this to do. It's just the next little step. And then there's all kinds of challenges that happen, right? Because a lot of times you're not on trails, so you can injure yourself. So you're always carrying medical supplies. Sometimes it gets you could get sucked in with fog. And so you have a way to bivvy overnight if you can't move in the dark. Sometimes it'll be a dark zone because you can't paddle in moving water. So you have to get out and camp. So you have to have a lot of gear with you as well. And there's stages, transition areas where you can kind of replace your gear and switch out your gear. So you're not carrying all of it all the time. But yeah, it's definitely a gear intensive sport.
So you say, you're trying to get from one point to the other without any route. What are you given? What kind of guidelines are you given? Because isn't there issues with like private property or missing a crucial point to maybe cross a river or something? What are you equipped with?
It varies, but kind of the standard is you get a map and a compass, and then you'll get the coordinates of where the points are that you have to find. And these points are actually physical things. They're orienteering flags that you find in the woods. And some of them can be manned if they're, closer to civilization. So you see where it is, and on the map there'll be a document that goes with it called the rules of travel, and it'll tell you should cross the river at this point and give you a lat long, basically a UTM coordinate. And so you have to sort of get to that point because that's the safe crossing, and they might flag it so that you're there. And then some of the roads, they might say these are off limits, so you're not allowed to get on this 4-lane highway, or you're not allowed to take this trail because it goes through private property, or things like that. So you sort of know where your constraints, and then beyond those constraints, it's just up to you to decide what's the best way. So if your team is really good at bushwhacking, you might leave this trail and go up and over the mountain. Or but if you're really fast runners or bikers and there's a road around, you might decide to take the longer, flatter route around. And so there's no one good choice. It really depends on the condition of the team at that moment and the team's strengths.
So fascinating, man. It's so interesting. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of freedom within the bounds of what adventure racing is, unlike, say an Ironman triathlon, probably equally as difficult for training wise for those single day races. That's a set distance, set disciplines every time. The location obviously can be different, but it's, what you're doing. It's kind of like varies how long each discipline can be and how often you do it.
And you don't know necessarily, like this race that's coming up in a week and a half, we're going out to do Expedition Oregon, which is a 5-day event. And we don't know. We know that it has mountain biking. It has pack rafting, which is paddling in whitewater. And it has trekking and mountaineering. And it also has rappelling. But we don't know the distances or the order, or how many times that we're going to do everything. But they did tell us it starts with a 60-mile whitewater pack raft, so we know that. So we can kind of plan, well, all right, it's Oregon in May, do we want dry suits? We're going to have a repair kit, a medical kit. A 60-mile paddle might take us 15 hours, so do we want some kind of a bivvy where we could stop, or are we going to be allowed to go through the night? We don't know that yet because we don't have any maps. Typically you get the maps the day before the race starts, and you basically have that evening to look at them and sort of decide what you're going to do. And that process could take anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours or longer. You're looking at the maps and you're highlighting ways you might go, and then you might make, race time decisions where you go, well, we were going to go that way, but that looks really terrible, so let's not. And that kind of stuff. And it's the adventure. That's the adventure part. And you never know. I mean, some of the best adventures I've had were also my worst races in terms of performance, right? But
yes,
they were great adventures.
We had an adventure just a few weeks ago at a bike race, some friends and I, and we had an adventure, that's for sure. We were dead last. Absolutely dead last, to where it was more memorable that way, honestly, the way we did it, and
yes.
how we finished,
yes.
and how slow we were, and wrong turns. And so I can see that. So, man, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Having done it so many years, could you share a story about maybe an experience that was really adventurous, but maybe not your best race?
Yeah, I can. Probably I could talk for days and days on this, but
I can imagine.
So one that really is very noteworthy is pretty early in my expedition career. So an expedition race is kind of 5 days or longer, and this was a 10-day race down in southern Chile in Patagonia, and it was a very remote race, and we got to the last trek, and it was basically trek across this peninsula to this place called the Sea Cross at the end of the world. That was the finish line. And they kind of had a prescribed route on this very bad map. And so the team, we started out and we expected it would take us 2.5 days to do this trek because there's no trails and you had to cross a couple of mountain ranges. The 2.5 days, we brought all the food that we had left in our transition supply bin, but it wasn't enough food. So after 2.5 days, we were out of food. So we were kind of foraging for berries every so often. And then on the third morning, we looked at the map and went, well, if we take a shortcut up and over this ridge line, we can sort of drop down onto the beach. Well, so we tried that, and then a storm came in that forced us off the ridge line earlier than we wanted to be. So then we had to sort of coast-steer, traverse around the coast on the Strait of Magellan. So we go down to the beach and we're walking along, and the first thing that happened to us was there's a big rock in the beach, and we're kind of walking up to it, and we're in a good mood. It's morning, and we're only like 10K from the finish line. And this big rock turns out to be a sea lion. And it just rears up and roars and lumbers into the ocean, not 20 feet in front of us. And we're all like, holy cow, wow, did you see? That was amazing. And then we realized that the beach runs out and we now have to get into the very ocean that it just went into to swim around this bluff to keep going. And so we do that. And it's, now we're cold and wet. And one of my teammates has a very swollen ankle, and it turns out it was broken. And another teammate, we learned at that point, couldn't really swim very well. So he gets hypothermic, and we're just falling apart. And we're running out of food. We don't have a lot of fresh water. And we actually went on like this for another 18 hours. And then we got to a cliff with an old lighthouse. And we could almost see the Sea Cross because it's this big monument. I think that's it right over there. But how do we get down off this cliff? Well, we found some old rope and tied it together and rappelled down into the ocean again. And you had to drop like the last 20 feet into the water. And then we got to shore, and then there's like a big rocky another set of cliffs. And then we just pitched our tents because one guy could barely walk. We didn't have any water, and we broke out the sat phone. And eventually we were rescued by an Army helicopter like 12 hours later and flown to the hospital because we were pretty dehydrated and lacked food. And we were less than 3 kilometers from the end.
No way.
Yeah. And this was like on day 11. So we had technically missed the race because it was a 10-day race. So we missed the cutoff. But, they were out looking for us, and we finally radioed in. We had to climb a hill, one of my teammates, to get a signal to call in, and they then located us and sent a helicopter. But yeah, it was quite the experience, and I learned a lot. But yeah, we didn't even finish the race. Only 3 teams did, actually. And so we ended up 4th, but we didn't technically make it to the end.
Holy cow, man. That is so on those really long races, like those 10-day races, are you seeing the organizers the days in between days or at night, or are there checkpoints, or are you just kind of out there?
No, you see them. There's transition areas where you're transitioning from like paddling a kayak to maybe riding your bicycle. And so that tends to be somewhere that's somewhat organized. And so they'll be there. So you sort of see them and you check in, and sometimes there's a medical tent and you can get some medical attention or resupply. You can usually get food out of your own packed bins. We pre-pack bins that we can then access during the race. But yeah, so you're seeing people, some races you'll see people every 3 or 4 hours, and some races it's every day or day and a half. But you rarely go, it's an exception where you're going to be going 2 or 3 days and not seeing anybody like that particular trek. And in shorter races, everything is just smaller, but it's still kind of the same thing. You run a 5K through the woods and you find 10 checkpoints, and you get on your bike and you go 20K and you pick up some more checkpoints, and then you get in a river and you paddle to a finish line and you pick up 2 checkpoints along the way. and all the time you're using your maps to figure out where you are, and so, but at every one of those transitions, you'll see the race organizers and volunteers, and they'll, cheer and help you along and stuff like that. So it's an easy sport to get into. It sounds maybe harder and tougher than it is, but it's because you're carrying weight, a backpack full of stuff. You're not really running. It's not, you're not going as fast as you do like in an Ironman or even, a sprint triathlon. They're going faster than I could ever go. I just can't move that fast anymore. But so I like the mental aspect of this, and it's more of an expedition and an adventure than a race, a kind of a horse
like a
race.
sprint or something.
Exactly.
It sounds like there's all these variables that could allow someone to be pretty successful at this if they're not the fastest, like planning, being able to navigate your way through the wilderness, through the woods, and also in preparation. You mentioned having to pack your own food. How much of the gear are you dependent on? Are you dependent on traveling with your kayak, with your backpack, with all that food?
Yeah, so it depends on the location, but typically most races provide the boats unless you're bringing a pack raft, basically a 5 to 8 pound inflatable boat that you can then carry with you. But everything else, if there's canoes or kayaks, they're going to be there. But like when I go to Patagonia, I bring 120 pounds worth of gear, bicycles and PFDs and paddles and food. Some food you can source there, and some food you like dehydrated meals. You really want to bring your own supply. But sweets, Snickers bars, carbohydrates, you can kind of find something in every country. Ramen noodles, those you can always find where you're going, typically. So there's sort of a mix. What I tend to do is look at, how much I'm bringing. And if I have two 50-pound bags that I'm taking on the airplane, and one's 50 pounds and the other is 35 pounds, then I bring 15 pounds of food. Right. I just fill in the rest of the weight with food.
With food. And whatever you get with food. If you've got 4 pounds, you're going to have 4 pounds.
That's right. That's what I bring. And I buy the rest in country. Right. So
there you go.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
This is so cool. Well, tell us maybe some of the most iconic races, or some of the differences between maybe something local and then something that's more well known.
Sure. So the nice thing, like any sort of sport, there's a local level and then regional and then national and then international. So, you can look up, there's a US calendar and you could find 70 or 80 races all across the United States. And they're anywhere from 6 to 24 hours typically. And a lot of them are on the East Coast because that's where all the people live. So there's kind of a more dense population and more races happening. And then there's always a national championship somewhere in the United States. And then internationally, there's a thing called the World Series, and it's made up of 10 to 15 events that happen all over the world, in Ecuador, France, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Canada, the UK, Africa. There's one in Southern Africa. So that's sort of the gamut of races. As far as iconic ones, some of the ones just most memorable, New Zealand has one called the God Zone. And New Zealand is just beautiful. Everybody should go visit there at least once in their life. It really is an amazing country, especially if you're into the outdoors. There's just everywhere you look, there's something to go see or do. The ones around the UK are surprisingly wild. I mean, you think of the UK and maybe even all of Europe as more settled and civilized, and yet, there's a race across Wales where you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, and there's no help for miles and miles. And
so cool.
So I did one across the Sweden. We basically traveled all the way across Sweden to the coast of Norway to the spine of the mountains, and then turned around and came back. So it was about a 600-mile race. And that was pretty amazing.
Holy cow. How long does a 600-mile race take you?
Well, that's a really long race. That one was only 8 days because it had a lot of cycling in it, which is the fastest mode. Typically, like you figure anywhere from 80 to 100 miles every 24 hours. But then as the race gets longer, that goes down, right? So, yeah, a 400-mile race could easily be 7 or 8 days long. The real iconic race that kind of got everybody sort of in my generation into adventure racing was a race called the Eco Challenge that was organized by Mark Burnett. And it was sort of before Survivor, one of his first forays into reality TV. And he started putting on these adventure races all over the world and making TV shows. And you can find them on YouTube. There's, I don't know, 8 or 9 of them. And then he stopped doing them because Survivor became very successful. And then 2 years ago, he brought it back after a 17-year hiatus. And so that's called Eco Challenge. And this last one happened in Fiji. There was 100 teams from all over the world, and it was on Amazon Prime. It's a 10-episode show that you can watch and kind of get a feeling for what a expedition race is like. And it was pretty iconic. I mean, there's jungle, there's, oceans, but half the island is dry. And so you have these areas where there's not enough water. And then the wet side, there's too much water. And it was a pretty amazing experience to go and do that. And also just seeing helicopters flying everywhere and cameras everywhere. And, but the Hollywood aspect was pretty neat because I hadn't experienced that before. So.
Wow, that's awesome. There's some adventure sports podcast alumni were racing in that. And that's really cool. I know that would you say that helped raise awareness for the sport, maybe grow it a little bit again?
It did, yeah. So that happening of the Eco Challenge, now there's a whole new cadre of people that are interested in adventure racing because they've learned about it, right? And that's been our biggest challenge in growing the sport, is that people don't even know it exists. So, and everybody that does it, it really, there's something satisfying about looking for a checkpoint in the middle of the woods and finding it. I mean, it's like you're a little kid finding a birthday present or opening a birthday present. It's just like, it's really exciting and exhilarating. And you're like, okay, a little success. Now let's find another one, It's addictive in a lot of ways.
Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, it's like kind of like an Easter egg hunt with a map.
With a map and not a lot of food is what it sounds like now.
Well, yeah, food's heavy.
Well, tell me where's one of the coolest places you've been able to go do this, or where would you tell us that, and also where is the sport really known for? You've mentioned New Zealand, here in the States, Fiji, in the UK. Where are kind of the hubs, but where's the coolest place you've been?
Yeah, they're all cool. I could tell you about all the international races, but really the United States has some amazing terrain. So if I just had to pick a couple, like a race called the Primal Quest that happened in Utah, it was based in Moab in the desert. And that terrain is really iconic worldwide.
Yeah.
So that was, an amazing spot to have a race, because you've got the Green River and the Colorado River and all those canyons and the desert and the just crazy mountain biking. And, there was slot canyons and 2 400-foot climbs and 2 400-foot rappels, just really adventurous terrain. So that would be definitely an iconic spot. Probably, there's maybe debate on this, but adventure racing probably started in New Zealand, and it's certainly very popular there. I mean, they have them in their grade schools and high schools. And, by the time the kids get, to adult levels, they're very good already, and their races are massive. They just have far more people in them than, the ones in the United States. So it's a very active country, I'd say, population.
It's active, and the terrain varies so abruptly in such a compact area. You've got alpine mountains and beaches and farmlands, and you've got everything. The tropics.
Have you been there?
No, I just, it's one of those. It's probably the top of my bucket list, and we've talked to one of my best friends, bike toured up and down it, And
Okay.
I've talked to him extensively. But yeah,
Yeah.
really what got me into New Zealand, like a lot of people's, Lord of the Rings, and since then just kind of been obsessed with it. But
Yeah. Well, that's a spot on description. I mean, it really is. There's everything you could want, very close.
very,
So,
very close. And in the American West is like that. You can get to places pretty quickly. Like Utah is not far from Colorado, which is not far from, frankly, the coast. You can get from Utah to Vegas to LA fairly quickly. And, but New Zealand's even more compact.
yeah.
Just on a
A
little
bit
island
quicker.
the size of Florida. You know what I mean? It's unreal. So that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. That's really cool.
Yeah. Probably the other iconic spot I would say was the World Championship, and I don't remember the year, 2015 maybe, was in Tasmania, and Tasmania was a really neat place to race, and it's sort of like New Zealand because it's an island and there's a lot of terrain, and it's at the south end of the planet, and so it's windy, and so there's a lot of the same environment in on the South Island of New Zealand as Tasmania, as Patagonia, because they're all down there in the higher latitudes of the South, the Roaring Forties kind of area. So they've got harsh winds and yeah, very interesting climate as well as terrain.
What would you say is the most difficult aspect of adventure racing for beginners? If you can remember all the way back then for you, or what you see out in races for new folks.
uh, it's probably the navigation, because there's just a lot going on that it takes practice, right? It just takes practice, So, and you think you kind of have a handle on it, and then you get lost, and that's when you really have, you have to kind of figure stuff out. You don't know where you are anymore, and you're like, okay, we got to do something because we can't just sit here. So I think that's one of the more difficult pieces is the navigation. Uh, and there are a lot of ways to get better at that. There's little orienteering events, little 1 hour navigation practice events all over the country and the world. That it's a little tiny map, and you're running around looking for checkpoints. But that gives you a good handle on the micro navigation. But then we're here and we got to get over there, and it's 40 miles away, and there's a mountain range in the middle, and that's sort of a different level. So yeah, and I'm still learning. I don't know if I'm still learning new tricks, but I'm relearning old ones that I seem to forget a lot.
Interesting.
I like to make
do
the same
realize,
mistakes.
Yeah, a lot of life is learning new things, but it's a lot of life is being reminded of what you used to know. And,
That's right.
And just
Yes.
being reminded of the lessons you've learned once before. So that's interesting that it's in this sport too. Well, what do you say is the traits or characteristics of people that do really well in the sport in the long run? Is it just a matter of, because we had a listener reach out and say they tried an adventure racing where it felt a little lost, like they didn't really know what to expect or what was going on. I'm sure everybody feels that way when they first try it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember my first race, and me and my teammate spent hours on the phone for months preparing for this race.
Wow.
And now I look back, and I'm like, what did we talk about? But I didn't even know, like, some of the mandatory gear. I didn't even know what it was. It's like, we got to bring a runner. What's a runner? What's a 2-foot runner? I've never heard of that thing. So
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
it's a loop of nylon or Dyneema that is used in climbing. But if you never heard the term, you don't know, and who do you ask? So, but there are beginner races. I think one of the problems is that people sort of jump into the deep end because that's fun, but then they get very lost and maybe a little disheartened. If you sort of do something slightly above your level, then you can, maybe overcome those challenges, as opposed to really just end up not making it to the finish line, which is not what you want. You want to be successful at the end of the day, right? But I think that people that are successful, it takes a couple of tries, but to sort of really understand what's going on. And then really it's the mental game, the people that know that things will get better, because sometimes you're carrying your bike through mud or a river, or you're pushing it up a mountain that's all rocky, and then you have to carry it down the other side because it's all rocky, and you're like, why am I doing this? And so, but in the end, it really, there's the type 2 fun, but there's some fun while it's happening, and it's an adventure. You never know what's going to happen. You never know. Your bike breaks and you have to carry it. Your boat sinks and now you've got to run this section that you thought you were going to paddle. There's just any number of things that can go wrong.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Your bike breaks and now you got to go on foot. Oh, that's got to be disheartening. Especially if you're the only one on the team or something that happened to, because you have to stick together. Isn't there something that you have to stay within a certain amount of, like an area within each other?
Well, it's 100 feet or 100 meters is
Holy
depending
cow.
on the race.
So pretty much within sight.
Yeah. And most teams try to stay, if not within sight, within voice contact. You never want to be where you have to yell for your teammate and they can't hear you. That's definitely a no-no. But, you could be in the dense woods and you may not be able to see your teammate, but you say, hey, you're still over there. And they're like, yeah, we're looking here. You look there. Like, all right, I'll look here for 3 more minutes and I'll meet you over there, kind of stuff.
You got to be really careful about who you pick as a teammate then, because you can quickly get out of earshot of folks pretty quick. Let's take a quick message break and hear from some folks supporting the show.
Tired of lying awake, tossing and turning, just hoping for a few hours of sleep? Get the sleep you crave with the one-of-a-kind Tempur-Pedic. Only Tempur-Pedic uses proprietary Tempur material that continuously adapts and responds to your body to relieve pressure, so you get deep, uninterrupted sleep. All night, every night. The Tempur-Pedic Summer of Sleep starts now with all Tempur-Pedic mattresses on sale and savings up to $500 on adjustable sets. Learn more at TempurPedic.com.
At Capella University, you're in control of your education. With the game-changing FlexPath format, you can set your own deadlines and move at your own pace. The faster you move, the more you save. Visit capella.edu to learn more.
All right, that's enough of that. Let's get back into Mark's story.
Yeah, well, you're not supposed to, and then there's the whole night aspect. Some people, navigating at night is a whole nother thing. And racing at night and being up all night, you get tired, you get sleepy, there's the whole, that piece. And then the eating, you have to eat all the time, because it's not like we're going to sit down and have a nice lunch. You sort of eat while you're going. And so at some point, if you're not eating correctly, you're going to bonk, or your stomach's going to go sour, or something's going to happen to you where now you have heat stroke, you're throwing up, so now you have to stop. So you're trying to avoid all those things and manage all of that while you're moving forwards, So there's a lot going on. And I think that's what's daunting to new racers. But, you start with a small race and you learn each little piece as you go.
There you go. You probably get familiar with the race through one of the big ones, like the Eco Challenge, seeing the documentary, or seeing something epic on YouTube, and then you're like, I want to do that. And you join a big race, and then all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense why people jump in and don't necessarily know. But if you start small and where it's okay to not know so much, I think that's the best way of learning, is just throwing yourself out there in that kind of environment where it's meant to be kind of, where you just learn as you go.
Yeah. And some people, me included, my first event was actually, I volunteered for an event at the Nantahala Outdoor Center.
That's a great idea.
And so I sort of saw what was going on and went, wow, this looks like it's kind of fun. I might want to, try one. So I signed up for one, and I didn't know how to navigate. I could read a trail map, but you put checkpoints off the trails, and I'm like, how do you find that? So we got totally lost. We finished it, but I went, okay, I got to go learn how to navigate, because I really don't know what I'm doing. And so I started just going to every navigation event I could find and practicing for years.
Wow. It does seem like a lifelong pursuit for you, or a passion that.
Yeah, it's the adventure, because I also travel and not race and just do roll your own adventures. My wife and I spent 3 months in New Zealand with pack rafts and bikes, just trekking and cycling and hanging out, and making our own. We went out for a 6-day adventure. We hired a plane to drop us off on the west side of Stewart Island, and then we trekked back over to the east side, which took 5 days, and we sort of went a circuitous route, and we saw kiwi birds and so I love the adventure part of it more than the racing part of it.
That sounds like an adventure sports podcast episode all in itself. Honestly, I'm sure a lot of the races you've done could be their own episode. Well, that's really cool. So for the racing aspect, you say you don't like that as much. I'm totally in that same boat. I'm just out there for the experience. I want to have fun. I want to have stories to tell afterwards. And I want to, for goodness sake, get out from behind the computer. What do you win if you do win the race? Is there any sort of prize?
Well, yeah, I mean, for the top teams in the big races, I think the purse at Eco Challenge was $100,000.
Wow.
Back in the day, there was corporate sponsorship, like in the 90s. But anymore, what you win is the glory of being first. And your ranking in the world ranking goes up. But there's really not a lot of races that give monetary prizes or anything like that.
Well, that's good. Keeps it pure.
Yeah, it does. And I've actually said this in the past that, when you add money into a race, people behave differently. And I much prefer races where you're out in the woods and you bump into another team and you're like, we can't find checkpoint 27. And they're like, oh, go over 2 more ridges and then go down this little ravine and you'll see it. Right. And they just tell you, they help you out. And that's the way races are. The people that are in adventure racing are very helpful.
And you're right. If money was an aspect, or a lot of money was an aspect there, it's there's no telling what can happen.
That's right. Well,
humans do weird things for money. That's for sure.
Yep. And so I like the way our sport is it's very at amateur status as opposed to professional.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you have a story or anything that's where you're talking about, like, you're pushing your bike up a hill for an hour and a half and you're thinking, why the heck did I fly across the world and spend money to do this? Has there ever been a moment, maybe right after something like that, where you've experienced something or saw something maybe similar to like that walrus or that seal or that sea lion and said, this is why I do this. This is incredible.
Yeah. Well, every sunrise, you've been out all night and then the sun comes up and it's just glorious. And usually you're in an amazing place. I've been to a lot of amazing places around the world, and people, it'd be like, well, I go to these iconic places where there are iconic things, but I don't actually see those. It's like going to Paris and not seeing the Eiffel Tower. Well, I was busy out in the woods, so I didn't,
I was running through a cow pasture.
But it's that kind of stuff. But yeah, some just amazing moments. We were racing in Maine, and we were paddling down this river, and we saw a mother deer and a fawn, and a bobcat came out of the woods and grabbed the fawn and in the water. So everybody's in the water. We're in the water. The deers are in the water. The bobcat jumps into the water, grabs the fawn and starts pulling it away. And the mother comes over and starts kicking and thrashing at the bobcat and eventually drives the bobcat out where the fawn gets away, and the fawn swims to shore. And then the mother swims to shore and they run up in the woods, and the bobcat kind of dejectedly swims out of the river all wet without a deer. And so that was a pretty amazing event. We were in awe. We stopped paddling and just floated and watched the whole thing happen. And you don't see that downtown very often.
No, you don't. That is that you're seeing victory and defeat all in the same.
It's like Wild Kingdom,
Oh yeah. That is wild. That is so cool. And I'm sure you just come across stuff. You're moving at a speed where you might surprise nature in that way and see something really special.
Right. exactly. Yeah, and you do a lot. Like, well, we were paddling in the Strait of Magellan, and a whale came up. Right, we're in these kayaks that didn't seem little until a whale came up. Then you're like, huh.
That is too cool. Golly, that is too cool. So I tell you what, I know folks are going to want to know your advice on this. For you've alluded to different aspects of it, but what is the best steps to take for folks that want to try this, that want to get into it? What's some essential gear they should just go ahead and have for even their first one, and where should they look to try one?
Yeah, well, you need a bike. Doesn't have to be an expensive bike. Just some mountain bike.
Mountain bike? Okay, mountain bike.
Yeah, $300 to $500 bike, and you could even get by with something less. But somewhere in that range would be a good starter bike, and you'd use it for a few years before you maybe wanted something a little nicer. And then you don't really need a boat or any boating gear, because that'll be provided at most shorter and beginner events. And then you need a backpack that's comfortable, and a compass. And that's, bare bones. You could go sign up for a 6-hour event and just give it a shot, see how it goes. You probably want to have a little bit of knowledge on how to read the map, but most beginner races, they tend to put the checkpoints in places like where one trail crosses another. So you're not navigating topo lines. You're just reading a trail map. As far as finding them, there's a calendar. The United States Adventure Racing Association maintains a community calendar. So if you go to usara.com, I think it's com, could be org. usara.com, and there's a calendar, and it's all the races around the United States. Yeah. So, yeah, and then you can just find one close to you, and if you don't have anybody to race with, email the race director and say, "Can I come volunteer?" And they'll love to have you. And by the end of that volunteering, you will know people that you could race with, because you're going to meet a whole bunch of adventure racers. Or if you have a little more, knowledge and skills in your repertoire already, you could just sign up and go do it and see how it goes. The worst that could happen is you don't get to the end, and you learn a lot, and you try another one. So.
Hey, that's what we're all about here, is getting out there and having fun and trying things. And it looks like there's a section too on usara.com for that's called New to AR, New to Adventure Racing.
Absolutely.
So
yep.
That's a great place to start.
Yes, for sure.
Well, let me tell you this as we wrap up, or let me ask you this. What have you noticed in the world of adventure racing? Is the sport growing? What is the sport trying to do, I guess?
I think we're in a growth cycle now because of the last Eco Challenge. It was getting, in my eyes, sort of starting to get a little older. I'm in my mid 50s. A lot of racers are in their mid 40s, and there are not so many newer racers. And now post Eco Challenge, we're seeing a lot of races are filling up, and the race director asks, and half the field has never done one before. This is their first race, so that's great. So there's this resurgence happening across the US and maybe the world. So I don't think it's ever going to be, like USA triathlon, because you can't put 1,000 people into the woods, right? It doesn't work.
Right.
Because you're all navigating, and you want to be somewhat independent, and so there needs to be this ability to sort of spread out relatively quickly. Otherwise, you're not navigating; you're just following the team in front of you, and that's not what you want.
Absolutely.
So you're never going to have 2,000 races. I think the biggest races are usually like 400 is huge. Most races are in the 100 to 200 people, which is fine.
No, it's great. I mean, you're not going to fill a stadium in the sense of spectators, because it's happening across the earth, across the terrain, and this is the community. The Adventure Sports Podcast is the community that understands that and wants those kinds of experiences.
Yeah. So 2 things I should mention. One is there's a Facebook group called the Adventure Racing Discussion Board. that is a great place to ask questions and learn a ton of stuff. It's a very active, very helpful group. It probably has 5,000 or 6,000 international members. So that's a good resource on Facebook. And then the other is this thing called dot watching. So a lot of races, all the teams carry GPS trackers so they can be tracked. So they can't use them to figure out where they are, but the organizers can post a map on the internet so you can follow the race online. And it's called dot watching because you're watching the dots move around on the map. And and then there'll be usually some kind of a stream telling you what's going on. And that's great fun. If you can't be at the race, you can at least sort of cheer on the racers that are there. And
that's awesome. Well, tell us, when is Expedition Oregon? And explain that a little bit and when you're going. Expedition Oregon is
May 10th is check-in. May 10th and 11th is check-in. And then we get on buses in the morning of the 12th, and the race starts at 8 a.m. on the 12th at some unknown spot. And it goes until the 17th, I think, 16th or 17th.
Oh, wow.
5 days. And it's over 300 miles. And it has a unique element in it that they're known for, which is bike rappelling. So you're biking along and you get to a cliff and you tie your bike onto your backpack in some fashion, and then you go down a rope.
I saw that picture that you sent over and thought, holy cow, what is he doing? I didn't realize that was unique to that.
So that's part of Expedition Oregon. It's billed as America's toughest race, which it probably is. It's very wild, and there should have been a nice international field, but COVID kind of has reduced it to about 40 American teams. But it'll still be a great event, and it will be tracked. And so, if you go to search on Expedition Oregon, you can eventually find the link to the dot watching site, and you can watch all of the racers. We'll be Team Lattanzi Navigation, which is my little company that makes maps and writes books and stuff. So, and me and two of my friends will be racing there. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, Mark, great luck. Good luck at that. And, we'll be cheering you on. I'm really excited. I'm excited to hear some stories from it too. It's going to be, 400 miles is plenty of canvas to paint some adventure on. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. I hope you're not overly prepared, because then there won't be any stories to tell. So.
Oh, well, I don't think I've ever been overly prepared.
Yeah, there's plenty that's gonna go wrong in a great way. So, well, thank you so much for joining us and talking a little bit about it. This was awesome.
Yeah, I love talking about it. It is my passion. I wish everybody could experience this. It's really living to the fullest.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
At Capella University, education is as smart as the world around us. With the FlexPath format, you can take classes at your own pace, set your own deadlines, and even leverage your previous experience to move faster. Now that's smart. Learn more at capella.edu.